Hey there. Welcome back to another episode of the Build Your Copywriting Business podcast. Hey,
Hello,
Kate.
hello.
Hello. Okay, so today we are going to answer a question that comes up a lot as people are building their portfolio sites. And that question is, should I put prices on my portfolio site? Kate, quick answer.
No. End of episode.
Oh, I feel like we've done that a couple
Yeah.
of times, and every time we do, I find it so amusing.
I don't know if
But
anyone else does,
obviously,
but at least we
nobody else does, but we do. Um, Obviously, of course, though, it's a little bit more
yes,
nuanced
as
than
with
just
anything.
don't put prices on your website. And there are certainly, quote unquote gurus out there who will say that you have to put prices on your website. But there are a couple of very good reasons why not to.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Kate, what's your first big reason not to put prices on the
Ooh, I
website?
don't know if any are less equal than the other, but the first one that comes to mind is that both on the lower high end for clients. So, for example, if you put a price on your site, and even if you put ranges, because I know people are like, well, I want to put ranges, I want to give people a sense of what it is. You're anchoring them to that price point. And so if you say, websites starting at 1,000 to 5,000, maybe it's a 35-page website that's going to cost 13,000 or, quite frankly more. So by saying 1 to 5, all of a sudden now the client thinks like, "Oh, well, why are you charging now, double that?" Or by the same token, maybe they see that and they're like, "Ooh, that's really low for what our need is. Why would we go with this person? Obviously, they're way too cheap." There's a lot of assumptions that people can make just from a price. And then on the other end, you might have a client that might be a really great client to work with. It might be a really easy, fascinating project. And they might see 1,000 to 5,000 and think, "Ooh, that's too high." But maybe all they needed was an about page that you could knock out in a few hours and still charge, maybe 500 or 750 or whatever it is. I'm just throwing prices out here. These are based in nothing, so please do not take any of them as in any way accurate. But the point being that you might then lose a lot of clients, potential clients that maybe you want to work with. Maybe you would flex your rates a little bit lower because you were really passionate about what the client stood for, or because you wanted to break into their industry and wanted a piece in your portfolio that represented that industry, or whatever it is. It just takes the option out of your hands. It takes any
Mhm.
negotiation off the table. And so you're just automatically kind of accepting and rejecting clients just based on a price point. And that's, in my opinion, it's not going to work out very well. And I shouldn't even say
Mhm.
opinion. In my experience, in my, taking clients and being flexible with how I work my rates has opened me up to so many opportunities that I might otherwise have closed myself off to.
Mhm. Well, and even if he's talking about anchoring, even if you say from
Mhm.
1,000 and you're like, well, then if it's more, then it's first of all, you still have the problem with the clients that see that 1,000 for a smaller project. And you wouldn't normally, you wouldn't charge 1,000 for that project, but you're never going to get a chance to talk to that
Mhm.
client because they're going to see 1,000 and leave. Or two, you're anchoring that price in a client's brain. So when you talk to a client and you propose, a website for, again, we're just picking numbers out of thin
Mhm.
air, but for 3,000, they're going to go, well, what do we have to take away to get down to 1,000?
Mhm.
Because I saw 1,000 on your site. That's what I'm comfortable with. What do we have? How can we change that? And you're like, there's nothing I could do to make this a $1,000 project, but they're going to have that price in their head. And the thing is that especially when you're getting started, or at least several years in, and quite frankly, it's still how I base most of my rates. Your rate should be based on, to a large degree, how long it's going to take you to do something, and
Mhm.
including writing and editing and concepting and meetings and all that kind of stuff. But so to choose a price is so completely arbitrary, and to say, well, this is the minimum I'll do it for. To Kate's point, what if it's a much smaller project? And why would you say, I'm absolutely not going to do this for 500, when it would turn out that 500 would actually be a really great rate for a project of that size?
Mhm.
Every project is completely different, and for you to choose rates before you even explored a project is really, really putting yourself in a difficult position. Um,
And I see a lot from students sometimes, again, because they see it on other copywriter sites, other guru sites of, in forms and saying, check here, like my investment, my budget is 1 to 5,000, 5 to 10,000. Or they put lines of copy on their site that say, only for serious entrepreneurs that are willing to invest at least 5K. What a turnoff.
mhm. Yeah, I completely agree. From the client side, like, I, my project is just as important as anybody else's project. And again, if my project is smaller, I'm not gonna spend $5,000. But it could be, but as the copywriter, it could be such a great and fun opportunity that could, maybe the initial project is small, but then maybe over your course of the course of the relationship with the client, you end up getting, over several years,
Hmm.
like $30,000 worth of work.
Exactly.
But because you didn't take this original $500 or $200 project, you never build that relationship with that client. And it doesn't have the opportunity to progress over the years to be a really, really fun partnership and a lucrative partnership and beneficial for both of you. So go ahead.
No, it's to build off that. So often a lot of contracts that are out in the world are, contracted full time because people want to work with you and see how you work. So if you're, similarly as a freelancer, not willing to take on a project, then to Nikki's point, you might be missing out on tens of thousands of dollars of work over time because someone wants to find the right fit and they're not going to throw necessarily their biggest project at you right out the gate when they've never worked with you before. So much opportunity
Mhm.
comes from these relationships that we build with our clients and treating them as, partners and not just looking at them as cash cows to squeeze the biggest dollar amount project that you possibly can out of them.
Mhm. Exactly. We say that when you're on the phone with a client, you're talking through the project. You don't quote the you don't once you get an understanding what the project is, you ask a lot of questions. You don't give them a quote on the phone. Why? Because you need a little bit of time to think about it. You need to time to look at your own schedule, make sure you can do it, but also figure out how long it's going to take you to write it, how long it's going to take you to add all these important pieces. So you don't quote on the phone. So why would you quote even before the phone call?
Hmm.
Essentially, when you're putting a price on the website, you're quoting before the phone call. And how could you possibly know what a project is going to entail? Even if you say, like, I will do one web page for this price. The projects, it could be a really complicated homepage,
Hmm.
it could be a super simple about page, it could be the scope in any kind of project is so broad that you couldn't possibly begin to quote a price before knowing what the project is, and before knowing, and even like sales pages, some sales pages are going to be mammoth
Hmm.
and are going to require a ton of work, and you should charge a high rate for them. Some sales pages are going to be relatively small, and so to first of all, you can't possibly quote a price before you even know what the project
Hmm.
entails. And again, by putting a price on your website, that's what you're doing. Even if you say it's a range, you're still quoting a price. And second of all, I forget what my second point was going to be, but I'm very passionate about the
That first
first
point
point.
is repeated for the second point.
Yes, double down on that first point.
I think one of the
That
arguments
you,
that I see all the time, though, is that, by putting these ranges, I'm finding my ideal client and I'm turning, I love that, the ideal. If you're not watching and listening, go on YouTube and check out Nikki's reaction to that point.
yeah, me rolling my eyes at that one.
Basically.
Yeah.
But you're making sure you attract your ideal client and making sure you're turning away people that apparently aren't your ideal client. But how the heck, to use polite language, do you know who your ideal client is without talking with them? That is one factor. Price and finances are one
Hmm.
factor. You can have such great relationships and such great work with clients, regardless of what price point they come in at. And so if you are starting to look at things
Hmm.
just as an opportunity to get the highest dollar amount project possible, you're turning away from the core of what you should be doing, which is serving your clients and being a service provider. It becomes a very different
Hmm.
way of running your business. And quite frankly, to me, how stressful to constantly be chasing these big ticket projects versus having potentially consistent work with still maybe a big ticket project here and there, or with a big ticket project
Mhm.
with clients you've worked on little ticket projects with. But why
Little
little
ticket.
ticket? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that idea of like, well, only if you can spend
Mhm.
$1,000 or above, you're my ideal client. Like, ooh, ooh,
Yeah.
what a crummy vibe. That's just gross. That's right. Like it's absolutely you should get paid
What you do. Yeah.
for your
Yeah.
services. But for you to say that the only thing that makes a client an ideal client, or the first thing that makes
Mhm.
someone an ideal client, is that they're willing to spend $1,000 or more, it's just the vibe is all wrong. And it goes back to making it all about you.
Mhm.
And when you're a service provider, it's not all about you. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't. If a project is $1,000 project, then
Yeah.
yes,
If it's
charge a
10
thousand
grand,
dollars.
charge 10
If it's
grand.
10 grand,
Yeah.
exactly. But for you to start off by saying, I don't want to work with you if you're not willing to spend, they don't even know you
Yeah.
yet. They don't even know
Why
you.
should I give you
So
$1,000 of my money? You know, how
yeah,
it goes both ways, right?
it's not about you, it's about what you can do for your target audience. And yes, you are looking to find the right fit, but to you find that fit when you talk to a client and you figure out whether the project is something that is good for you to do, whether the project is something that they need, whether the project is something that you want to work on, whether the project, there's so many different parameters that make a that affect a project and make a client an ideal client.
Mhm.
And there's so many times too that you don't even know that a client is a quote unquote ideal client till you're in the middle of the project and you're like, oh, I'm really enjoying this. This is super
Mhm.
fun. I wouldn't have thought I would, but I wouldn't have thought I would like it as much as I do, but I'm loving
Or they're
this.
paying me a ton of money, but these guys are like, I never want to work with them again, even for this amount of
Yes.
money.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I think if this, you have to spend it this month, or you have to spend at least this much, and I attest that I'm willing to spend at least this much. That vibe you're putting out is exactly what you're going to get back, and that
Mhm.
is not what you want to get back at all.
Yeah. I feel like we're chanting a little bit of John F. Kennedy here with ask not what you can do for your or ask not what your client can do for you, but what you can do for your client.
Yeah,
Which really though
absolutely.
is how it should always be. They're paying you
Hmm.
to be a service provider. They're not just paying you to produce something
Hmm.
that you're putting an arbitrary value on without knowing what it is
Yeah.
that they need, what their goals are, what if it needs to be a super crazy long sales page, or quite frankly if it doesn't. And this fits into packages. It's very tempting to put packages on your site of here's, I'll write one web page and a couple of emails as, a basic package, and then here's my other package. You can package things up once you know what the client needs, and maybe offer different price points based on potentially if you feel like, ooh, they need a lot, but maybe I want to offer them something else if they're not ready to go with the full package or whatever it is. But still doing that
Hmm.
tailored to your specific clients and what they need. To throw up random packages on their site, every client's going to have slightly different needs. And so if they choose something, and so if you do go that route, of having packages and they choose something, being the service provider and knowing enough to say, hey, actually, I think what you need is actually maybe less than what they said they wanted. And maybe that puts you out of a
Hmm.
little bit of work, but it's going to build a lot more trust if you are saying, hey, objectively, here's what I really recommend and what I think you
Hmm.
need. That's part of your job too. Part of your job is saying, hey, actually, this is the better approach. I did it once. I've sure done it a few times throughout my career, but one in particular that I remember where a client said, we need this email, we need to send about this and blah, blah, blah. And I forget the context, but it was actually like, hey, do you actually need to send this email, or was this other approach something better for this project? And they were like, oh, yeah, actually, that's what we need to go do. And so I didn't end up writing the email. And so I lost that project. But guess what? I continued working with that client for years. And so I didn't see it as, ooh,
Hmm.
I'm
And they knew they could trust you.
exactly. They knew I wasn't just trying to, get as much work as possible and just say yes, 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 and become a production factory for them. And they tossed what they needed and I just did it. It was having that partnership and being able to say,
Mhm.
yeah, it's okay that I don't get this, 50, 100, however much the email was going to be. It was, hey, I know I'm going to get more work with them because we have this relationship and it's positive. It's not just based on money.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly. Trying to force fit a potential client into a price before you know about the whatever the project is, or trying to force fit them into a template of, oh, I don't know what your project is, but you'll get a landing
Hmm.
page, you'll get 3 emails, and you get I have never seen a copywriter or really many service providers who have packages that they deliver those exact packages. It all If they try to do that, it ends up badly because every client is different and every project is different, and your focus again should not be on the ease of you selling packages, because it turns out to be a bigger of a pain in the rear end in the long run. But it should not be focused on you selling packages. It should be focused on what does the client actually
Hmm.
need. And I want to remind everyone too, and frankly, remind myself sometimes, that it's really easy to look successful on the internet,
Hmm.
really easy to look successful on Instagram and to say, oh, I offer these packages and I only work with clients who do this. And I only work with clients, and my price for a homepage is 10,000, and they can say that until they're blue in the face, but you don't know if anybody is actually booking that.
Hmm.
Or maybe more importantly, you don't know if anybody is actually then working with them again.
Hmm.
If they paid whatever for a project, or if they bought they purchased a package, and then afterwards they went, this isn't what I needed after all, or I paid too much for this, or what have you, and then they don't work with them again, and then they also tell all their friends not to work with this copywriter or this service provider. It's really easy to make it look like you're able to do anything on the internet, but you don't know if people are actually hiring them and or rehiring them.
Yeah.
And that's the key. That's where business is built, is in those relationships and being that trusted service provider.
Yeah. And it's so easy. I know people do it in the group all the time where like, oh, I saw this copywriter and here's their rates on their site. Am I wildly undercharging? And this is the going rate for this. And to step back and say again, everything Nikki just said, you have no idea about anything. But also, I've seen students in the US pulling rates from someone who's in the UK or Australia. And then even within the US, the rates are going to vary wildly. But also, you have no idea how much experience that person has. Yeah, maybe they have a really high ticket and you should charge your worth. Absolutely. We always say that. But if they have 10, 15 years of really great experience, or and not that years make all the difference, but to some extent they're going to have more practice and inevitably maybe know more tools and tactics from working with various clients. They might have
Mm-hmm.
a very different rate based on experience and where they are and what clients they've had and knowing what clients are willing to pay them for certain things. But again, that whole rate sheet you're seeing could be complete BS. So
Mm-hmm.
don't even look at it as a grounding point, because it's not valid data. It's not data
Mm-hmm.
that's grounded in anything in your reality. So yes, is it
Mm-hmm.
much easier to be like, oh, okay, this is a starting point? Some bigger copy sites have some rate sheets too, which are complete bogus BS. Calculators, we've already talked about, complete BS, but bears repeating.
Mm-hmm.
So doing the time, and I wish there was an easy, here's your rate, post it on your site and it's going to be great. It's not how it works. And might you get clients that are like, oh, yeah, I want to see your rates? Sure. But then you just have a conversation with them and say, no, actually, here's why. And if they don't
Mm-hmm.
want to work with you, then how
Exactly.
is that your ideal client, that they just want to take rates and base hiring you off of arbitrary rates versus you doing your job
Mm-hmm.
to say, here's a rate based on what you actually need. So, doing the work, figuring out your rate, figuring
Yeah.
out how long it's going to take you. It's not going to be perfect. It's going to be a little bit of, in the beginning, maybe you charge too much because you're like, oh, it didn't take as much time as I thought. Or maybe you charge too little because you realize, ooh, I underestimated the amount of time that actually goes into this. But over time, it'll get a
Mhm.
lot easier.
Yeah. And just very quickly to piggyback on that, most clients will start out by asking what your
Mhm.
rates are.
Mhm.
The vast majority. And why will they
'Cause
do
they don't
that?
know.
Because they don't know what else to
Mhm.
ask. Clients are not professional clients. They are professional whatever field they are. They are not professional clients. They don't know how to work with a copywriter. They don't know what to ask. So the first thing they're going to ask is how much it costs. And but that shouldn't throw you. It shouldn't mean that you need to answer that question right
Mhm.
away. Instead, what you should be saying is, that's a great question. I'll be happy to go through that with you. But in order to make sure that I can give you the best estimate, the best quote, I need to know more about this project. So let's sit down and chat. It won't take too much time, but I have some questions, and really dig in and make sure that you have an understanding of the project, so that when you give them a price, that it's a price that is reasonable for you, and a price that makes sense for their specific
Yeah.
project.
And I think this goes back to, we talk a lot about, not doing things that are for you and selfish based. And I think throwing out rates for you can feel like, oh, this saves me time. This is going to save me time versus going down the road with this client and then they don't hire me. And then I've just wasted however much time. That's part of your job. And so if they do hire you and you've had a great hour-long conversation, factor that into your rate. That's not just free time. Factor that in. But inevitably, yes, you're going to have
Mm-hmm.
some conversations that don't go anywhere. And that's okay. Maybe they come back later. Maybe they talk to other copywriters and realize that that's BS and you were basing it on something that was grounded in reality, and come back and work with you. That
Mm-hmm.
happened. I know it's happened to you. It's happened to me. Where it's like, oh yeah, actually, your rate seems, yeah, did it seem high or did it seem whatever, but we're going to work with you because, oh wait, you actually did the work and gave us a
Mm-hmm.
real quote. uh so do the work because it's part of our jobs. And anytime
Mm-hmm.
that instant comes to save yourself time, think, okay, is it saving me time and is it helping my client? And if the answer is not yes to both, and it's just saving you time and not benefiting your client, consider
Mm-hmm.
rethinking your strategy. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And the project, benefiting the
Yes.
project
Yeah.
as well. Because sometimes things can seem fast and easy for you, might even seem initially fast and easy for your client. Although often it's not. Things that we think are going to be fast and easy for our client or not. But if in the end it also does not benefit the project, if it's going to mean that the project is just more complicated going forward, then you're not doing anybody any favors anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So, to regroup, prices on the website, no. And we would encourage you, if you're still like, well, I just don't know, I just kind of feel like, look, this is your
Yeah, you can.
business.
Absolutely can.
You could put it on your website if you want to. But I hope we've made it very clear exactly why we have such a firm stance about our feelings on that. Make sure that you are being the best service provider you can be, and as professional and as much of a partner, a true partner for your clients as you possibly can be. So that's it for another episode of the Build Your Copywriting Business podcast. We hope it was very helpful, and we'll catch you back for the next one. Bye, everyone. Thanks for watching. Make sure you don't miss any tips, tools, or tactics for copywriters by clicking subscribe right now. And of course, you can always find us over at filthyricwriter.com. We'll see you next time.